Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Thumma as-salatu was-salam ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina wa Habibi Ilah al-Alameen Abil Qasim Muhammad wa ala alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin al-ma'sumin wal la'natu ala a'daihim ajma'ina min al-ana ila qiyam yawm ad-din. Amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So it's not Eid. At least for New York, it will not be Eid. It is still possible for other parts of this country to have Eid. What I'd like to do today is to have a conversation that kind of explains to us why these differences have come up, where is the basis of this information, and to talk briefly about Zakaat-al-Fitra to give everyone a better understanding of both why we're not celebrating Eid tomorrow and what our obligation is when Eid night does begin, what do we have to accomplish. So, as we start to have this conversation, one of the things that I've done that, because I would like to have the ability to have a conversation, is we do have a Slido that will be working with this. If they give me, do you have a remote for me? So there's this online tool called Slido.com. Slido is a place where you can post your questions appropriate to our conversation, and everybody who logs in can see the questions as they're posted. They're all posted anonymously, but you can see the questions and you can upvote the important questions. So as if everybody's paying attention to the questions that are being asked and you see a question that you're interested in hearing about, you can upvote so here we go, Slido, oh, wait, here. So if you go to Slido.com and you enter the meeting number 2570179, as we go through the conversation, if you have a question, you write your question in there, or you keep looking at the questions that are there, and if you see something that's interesting, you can upvote it, so that when we start asking questions, we'll look at the questions that most people are interested in first before we go to anything else. And in the meanwhile, I have it open as well too, so I can see the questions as you pop them up, and I can delete all the bad questions as they come in. So I'm kidding, I'm kidding, I'm not serious about that. So our discussion tonight, inshallah, will be around the concept of the moon sighting and what's going on with the moon sighting and why moon sighting is important and why we go through this entire process. So, the moon sighting begins with the idea that Allah in the Quran talks about وَإِذَا رَأَيْتُمُ الْهِلَالِ, that Allah says if you see the moon, then the month begins for you. The Islamic month is based upon the sighting of the moon. Now, when it comes to how do we understand what is the sighting of the moon, the ulama have some difference of opinions. Famously, Sayyid Khui's opinion, rahmatullah alayh, which became very popular in his time was that basically said, yes, how do we know where does the seeing the moon count for you? And he says, well, if it's night where you are and it's night where the moon was seen, that means you guys are sharing one night, and anybody who shares the night can count the sighting of any moon in any location based as long as it's night there, it's night here. So for example, those who follow Ayatollah Khui right now in Iraq, in Iran, are messaging those of us in New York, in California, in New Jersey, in Ohio, and saying, did you see the moon there? If the moon is seen there, tell us because it will apply to us. Sayyid Sistani had a different opinion. Sayyid Sistani's opinion actually goes back to an older classical opinion that talks about the idea of what's called a shared horizon. That you and this person in another city are in a region where the sky looks the same to you, and that when you're looking at the sky, you're seeing the exact same thing in the same area. Now historically, this is the way things were done, that for example, if I lived in Najaf, and someone saw the moon in Baghdad, we would say, Baghdad is a couple of hours away, we see the same sky. When I look at the sky, I can see the same thing as what you can see, so therefore it counts. But if I lived in Najaf and someone from Egypt called and said, it's Eid, we would say, well, Egypt is really far away, you and I don't see the same thing in the sky, so we have a different horizon. And the argument here was to say that every region has a sky that they look at, and those that are regionally centric around it share the same sky, and therefore they can share an Eid, but others don't. The consequence of this is that regionally speaking, in a country like America, which is massive, you could have parts of America that have Eid and parts of America that don't have Eid, because the sky that we take a look at, it's a 6-hour flight. Most people move around to the other side of the globe in 6 hours, and we only get from New York to California. So it becomes an issue that talks about that in the size of this country, it's likely that we'll be seeing different things in the sky simultaneously. So in this, we can tell that there are differences that are going to happen. Scientifically speaking as well too, we find that it is possible to have differences. Now remember something, when we look at the sky, it's a consequence of both the tilt of the earth on its axis, right? When it's summer, we see the northern hemisphere tilt closer to the earth. When it's winter, the northern hemisphere tilts away from the earth. It's also the impact of the moon, the position of the moon, the angle of the moon, and how it rotates around the earth. It's also the aspect of the earth rotating around the sun. All of these elements play a factor in determining what is considered to be appropriate for the night sky. Now what we can do scientifically is we can take a look at and calculate all of the angles, the angle of the earth, the angle of the moon, the position of the moon, the position of the earth, the time of day, and we can come to calculations of where it's possible to see the same thing in the sky simultaneously and where those angles will change based upon mathematical calculations to know where it's possible to see something, where it's less likely to see something, and where it's impossible to see something. So, using science to understand what can we see, what can we see, is it better or worse? Well, now here's the consequence of it, and let's take a look at this together and you'll see. Here we go. Okay, so this first map is what's going on right now. Now what we've determined scientifically, the green area means, oh, I need the mic too, right? So, okay. The green area means that it's very easy to see. The blue area means it's easy to see if conditions are perfect. The gray area means that you have to be able to find the moon with an optical aid, but if you find it, then you can see it. The red area means it's next to impossible to see, and the black means it's literally impossible to see. So what science did for us is it said, okay, the idea of these horizons, what's possible to be seen, what can we calculate out? They went through this process of doing these calculations to make it possible for us to understand, okay, can you potentially see it? Is the angle of the earth supportive of the idea that the moon can be seen? Is the angle of the moon and the positioning, all of these things, when we take it into account and we compare it with the position of the earth, what's physically possible? So what this did for us is that take a look at this blue area, about how big this blue area is right now. This whole blue area will see the same night sky and will see the same features in the sky and has the same angle when looking at the moon that's appropriate for it to be seen. Historically, we wouldn't have ever been able to do this. We would have said, well, you know, over here, New York is over here, so New York and New Jersey, Connecticut, they'll share one sky. Orlando, Miami, they'll share one. Houston, Dallas will share one. California, and we would have made separate regions. Because of the benefit of science, we can take a look at the entire country and we can take a look at the entire globe and make determinations of where it's possible to actually see the moon and where it's possible for us to understand that a moon sighting can or cannot happen. This is actually tonight's sky. This is an example of tonight's calculation for Thursday, April 20th, and this is the reason why there's been an entire conversation around, can we in New York see the moon or not? Because if you take a look, all of America is blue, and this little area up here that's gray is New York. So in New York, the condition is such that you could only see it if the conditions are perfect and you use an optical aid, like you use your phone or you use a telescope to figure out where is the moon. But in the rest of this, as long as the sky is clear, you can see the moon relatively easily. So the conversation became that, okay, then if they see it here, does it apply to us? No, because our horizon is different. Our potential to see the moon is different. And we know this already in advance of the moon sighting. Now, just to show you that this isn't something we only do for Ramadan. This map is produced and generated for every single month. This is the map that happened and came into existence at the start of the month of Ramadan. That when the start of the month of Ramadan came, remember, March 22nd, we were looking for the moon. We were wondering, is it going to be the first of Ramadan or not? Here was the map describing to us that, look, all of this world was in green, that it was easy to see. And here it was possible to see, and here it was difficult to see. Which is why, if you notice, this year, the month of Ramadan started almost unanimously around the world because of the potential to see the moon was similar, and the reality of seeing the moon was also similar, that we actually had the ability to see this moon together. So this map gets generated on a monthly basis. This calculation is structured, and there's a variety of different organizations. It's not just one, but multiple different organizations go through this process of preparing and planning ahead so that we understand that if we need to look at the moon, can we potentially even see the moon? Or is it impossible to see the moon? So these tools become useful for us to figure out what's going on. If we look at now, for example, a more precise view, because that view doesn't really tell you where it splits on New York, New Jersey, what's happening. This, if you take a look and you see that blue line is hitting right by New York. So this is the reason why we're saying that this year, New York and New Jersey are actually likely to have the potential of different sightings of moon, and it's possible that in New Jersey it'll be Eid on Friday, and in New York it'll be Eid on Saturday. Because the logistics of the calculation, the day in history, the day in the year, when we do the calculation, this line just happens to fall right on the basis of New York. Now, it doesn't happen every month like that, like we looked at the previous month. It doesn't happen very often like that. It doesn't happen many days like that. But it just so happens that our test this year, as mu'mineen, and what do, is that the line literally falls on New York. So New York, New Jersey, well, New York, Boston, Connecticut, Vermont, Maine, Montreal, all of these places are outside of the curve. So if, for example, it's seen in the other side of this curve, if it's seen in the blue, whether that be in Washington and Orlando, which they haven't seen it yet. There was a report in Miami, but that report was false as well too, nothing in Miami. Atlanta hasn't seen anything yet. Ohio hasn't seen anything yet. But if, for example, in this blue area, someone comes forward and says that we saw it, they're saying there's a better chance that on California on the West Coast that someone will have the ability to see it and it'll be documented that it was seen. Now, because they all share in this blue area, there is the potential that they will be able to universally look at and say that the horizon and the calculation of the horizon was same for all of these places. If it's seen in one, everybody in blue can participate. So it's still possible that tonight we'll hear a report. Moon was seen in another part. Dallas is saying they can't see it, so it's not going to be Dallas. But West Coast, maybe it's possible. Because they share the same horizon, they may be able to share as far as New Jersey and Washington, D.C. It may be possible for them to be able to declare and say that Eid is on Friday. But for us, two things have played into a factor here. One, we didn't see the moon ourselves, right? I got up on the roof. I promise I did the best that I could. I was on that roof tonight as well too with everyone else, and my imamah did not fall off for anyone who's curious. You yourself backed out and said you didn't see it either. So there was something that looked like the moon, but then a couple of minutes later it looked like a cloud. So it didn't really. But we tried. So one is that we didn't see it. And two, the second argument would be that, well, what if someone did see it in New Jersey or Washington, D.C.? It's close enough that maybe we can count it. But it wasn't seen. So we have no argument for the basis of New York to say that it is possible for Friday to be Eid, even if it's seen on the West Coast. The truth of the matter is that this happens, and this conversation happens every single month. Us as ulama and us as a community, we have people around this country who gather together every month to help us determine where, when, and how the moon was seen, and who does it apply to. SIJNY itself puts out an email at the start of every month and gives you an explanation where the moon was seen, who it applies to, and who it does not apply to. This is not something we do only in Ramadan. This happens every single month. This conversation is going on. But the truth is, it doesn't affect us most of the time. It doesn't make a difference from us most of the time, which is why as a community, we never go into the details of discussing it. But it is a useful thing to understand and to know that there are calculations, we are paying attention, and we're taking a look at both. We're evaluating scientific calculation and values in scientific formats of how to determine this, as well as not ignoring the Quranic injunctions of seeing the moon with our own eyes. That we put both of these together and we say, if I have to be able to see the moon with my own eyes, let me make sure that I've done all of the research so that when the time comes, I have yaqeen and certainty that I did the best that I could. And I used all of the available resources to determine what does Allah want from me. And this is a legitimate scientific process. So, this is the general information about this process. This is, for example, something else that we use as well too. This isn't us, this is scientific calculation. This is already set for, okay, I took it down, but it's for Hicksville. This is another tool that we use. This website where they have the scientific calculations tells you day by day what is the possibility of seeing the moon, what time it's seen, what are the calculations, and it shows you other calculations as well too. But this is open right now to seeing the moon. On the 20th of April, here's the schedule. There's a 0.4% chance of visibility of the moon. That's what today's possibility was. At 7:45 p.m., the altitude of the moon was 7 degrees off the horizon. We already knew that. We knew that the location that we have to look is 284 degrees west-northwest, meaning that if 0 is north, from there we would turn to our left and we would go north-northwest in that direction, and that's where we would see the moon. And we knew that this is where the calculation and the time and the potential of the time that we had to be able to see the moon. We paid attention to all of these details, and we do it on a monthly basis to make sure that we're not negligent, that we're not out there at 6 p.m. looking for the moon when the moon is not physically possible to be seen at 6 p.m. This altitude minimum of 7 is where you can start to see the moon. So this is why we were looking very low off the horizon. That's why we had, for those high up on the roof, to look down, because the buildings are in the way and preventing us from being able to see 7 degrees over the horizon. So these calculations are taken very seriously. We're not just randomly going out there and looking in any direction. Anybody see anything? No, we pay attention. We use as much of science as we can because it's right. If we have the resources, we should. So we do all of our research. We educate ourselves. We pay attention to every detail. We see the rising and the setting, the percentage of chance of visibility. We see the time that it should be visible, when it hits over the horizon, where it'll hit over the horizon. And then we go out and we educate as many people as we can to go out and use these tools to go and research and learn so that we can collectively look for the moon. So I know historically it was just that everybody got up on their roof and looked around, but we do a bit better than that now. And we do it much more scientifically to make sure that we can see it. So at this point in time, the fact that we can't see it, we've exhausted every option and we've done the best research that we can to come to the conclusion that tomorrow is going to be the last of the month of Ramadan. Now, that within itself is a blessing, that tomorrow is the last of the month of Ramadan. Before we go further, I'm going to put this back up there. If anyone has questions on the moon sighting, this is the information on the moon sighting that we've talked about. You can post your questions. I will see them here, and we can discuss them as well too. Now, I know that there's this idea of the fact that there's one more day of Ramadan, but this Ramadan has been very mutabarak, has been very blessed and bountiful for us. The day of dua for us is Thursday night. This month, we've been blessed, literally blessed, that there have been 5 Thursday nights in the month of Ramadan. Meaning, if you had a hajat that you wanted to ask for, if there's something you want to ask Allah for, it's not going to get better than this. The collection of all the different things that we have available to us of where your dua is accepted, tonight is a very special night. Tonight is an incredibly special night, and it's a ni'mah. While the night of Eid is a night of ibadat as well too, but the fact that Allah gave us one more night in which our breath is ibadah, our breath is tasbih, our sleep is ibadah, and Allah is happy with us, and Allah is rewarding us, and Allah has invited us to His bounty. And it is also the night of Thursday where if you ask, Allah gives you. Ni'ma ala ni'ma, nurun ala nur. This is a great blessing. The other thing is Friday. The final Friday of the month of Ramadan is known as Jumma-tul-Wida, or the Friday of bidding farewell. Fridays as well are an important time of asking for dua. They are attached to and associated with the Imam of our time, Sahib al-Asri wa zaman, ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu. Friday is the day that you wait for Imam Zaman. Friday is the day that you call to Imam Zaman. It is from the mustahabbat to recite Dua Nudba on the day of Friday. Is a day of Eid for the mu'mineen. It's not the Eid that you were hoping for, but Friday is still a day of Eid. It is a day of asking for your hajat. And I will tell you from my own personal experience, and I invite you as well too, that on the last Friday of this month, in the past, since 2009, I've established a practice, and I swear by it myself, that after the time of Zohar or the time of Jum'ah, to recite Ziyarat-e-Ashura, pray the 2 rakat salat of Ziyarat-e-Ashura, and ask your desires, Allah fulfills them. And it has never happened to me where it has not come true. So, and those who would like to, tomorrow after Salat al-Jum'ah, whoever wants to stay, will recite Ziyarat-e-Ashura together, recite the 2 rakat salat, and ask for your hajat. And inshallah, Allah will fulfill them. Now ask for good things, okay? I don't want to hear about them. If you ask for the Knicks to win the championship, don't be surprised, that's not coming true. Prayed for that 10 years ago, it didn't happen then either. But the idea is that it's an opportunity to ask, and that's it. While we're busy being sad that we didn't get Eid tomorrow and we have to fast for one more day, that one more day is a very mutabarrik day. It's not a normal day. Take advantage. If it's that one last day of the month of Ramadan, take the time that Allah gave you a day of blessing to be the last day of Ramadan, and He gave you the answering of your hajat. So, it's a good opportunity, and which opens us up to that tomorrow night, as soon as tomorrow night begins, do we need to go look for the moon tomorrow night? Why not? No, why don't we have to if you don't have to? 30 days. The Islamic calendar month cannot have more than 30 days. So tomorrow night, whether I see the moon or I don't, or whether you see the moon or you don't, it's Eid. Okay? There's no 31 fast in Ramadan. It has never happened. It will never happen. Positive. I'm positive on this one. 30 fasts is the maximum, right? So there's no need to look for the moon. If you look for it, it is still mustahab to see the moon and see the new moon of a month. It's mustahab. It's a great thing to do. But do we have to? No, because we hit 30 days and we know that Saturday is definitely going to be Eid then. One of the first things that becomes wajib when it comes to Eid is as soon as the night of Eid begins, something called Zakaat-al-Fitra becomes obligatory upon every person who has fasted and who is a Muslim, or even if you haven't fasted, who is a Muslim, to perform for the day of Eid. Zakat-al-Fitra is a very interesting both social, economical, and communal concept. It is a responsibility of a tax that every Muslim, regardless of your income, regardless of whether I have extra money, I have enough money, I have to pay. The only exception to Zakat-al-Fitra is that person who does not have enough money to pay for their expenses and does not have a source of income to overcome their expenses. So for example, you and I today, we may not have all of the money we need for 2023, but we're not considered faqir. We're not considered faqir. Why? Because we have a job. And as long as we have that job, it's going to keep paying us and we're going to have a continued source of income. But if it should so happen that, for example, I don't have enough money to cover my expenses now, I don't have a source of income to cover my expenses for the rest of this year, Zakat al-Fitra is lifted from me because my responsibility before I give others is to have enough to take care of myself. But this is a tax that we have to pay, which from Tawdi al-Masail is explained as a person who at the time of sunset, ghurub, on the eve of Eid al-Fitr, is baligh, sane, and not unconscious, poor, or a slave, must give on his behalf and on behalf of those who are dependent on him 1 sa'a, which is 3 kilograms or 6.6 pounds of food, per head of the people that himself and his dependents, to someone who is entitled to receive zakat. This becomes wajib on every Muslim to perform as soon as the night of Eid begins. The time to perform this task is from the night of Eid and to the day of Eid. If you go to Salat al-Eid, then you have to do it before you attend Salat al-Eid. But if you don't go to Salat al-Eid, you have until the afternoon to offer and to make sure that this amount is paid. If you can't pay your income, then it's not wajib on you, and it's wajib on you and all those who are dependents in your house on the night of Eid. How much has to be paid? We said 6.3 kilograms or 6.6 pounds of food, or its equivalent in value. So meaning that when it comes time for me to pay this, I don't have to walk up to someone and say, hey, here's a bag of rice, or here, here's a bag of uncooked dal. I can give them the financial equivalent or the cost of that item, and it will be considered as fulfilling my responsibility. Not every obligation in Islam can be satisfied by paying money. When it comes to, for example, your fidya and your kafara, fidya meaning I couldn't fast and I need to give 1 mud or 750 grams of food in place of every fast. Or if I have a kafara where I have to feed 60 poor people, I have to give the food to fulfill these requirements. When I pay the money to have someone do this fidya or kafara on my behalf, the responsibility is not lifted until that person takes that money, converts it to food, and then distributes the food. But when it comes to Zakat al-Fitra, there's no such obligation. I can just give the money, and as long as I give the money and the person receives the money, it's sufficient. Now, cost can vary based on location and where we make and our representative. Now, for example, in this city, in this area, it's very different in America than, for example, many of our Eastern countries. In Eastern countries, it's not considered aib, it's not considered inappropriate that a person who is needy or poor goes and says that I am needy and poor and give me. In America, we don't have this culture, especially in our communities. Many times a person who sits with us, eats with us, spends time with us, may be needy, but it's inappropriate in this culture. It's considered aib, it's considered a negative quality to say that I am a needy person. So what happens is for us to find someone who is mustahiq and to give them this ourselves is sometimes very difficult. But for example, we can appoint a representative who knows these people, who is associated with, who there is no problem in asking and for people asking from them and receiving aid, to be our representative to disperse this food. That representative makes a decision on what is it going to cost them to be able to disperse this food, disperse this money on your behalf. And it may vary. And we see that today. That institutions, like whether it's our center here, Al-Khui in New York, or other institutions like Nasimco and other places, which disperse these funds on our behalf because people approach them for assistance, have different price handles on what it costs to be able to alleviate and fulfill your obligation of fitrah. And the reason that these differences exist is that each one bases it upon their location or region to determine what does it cost and what's appropriate in that area to offer them. Now, a national or international organization may actually have a lower price because they look at the entire country's average and they look at where are they getting money from and where are they giving money to be able to disperse and determine what's an appropriate amount. A center like ours that's based in Long Island, that has one of the higher costs of living in this country, may have a higher rate and may choose to actually ask for more to make sure that they with dignity can offer the people who live in this area an amount that will be satisfactory and sufficient to support those people. This is why you see differences in the amount of what is charged for fitrah, is that each person looks at the obligation and the resources in the area they're in to determine what do I need to fulfill and to alleviate this responsibility off of our shoulders. Now, it is obligatory on the head of household for all dependents. Now, this is a fun one. That if, for example, I have my kids and my wife in the house, my brother decides to come to visit me on the 30th of the month of Ramadan. Tomorrow my brother's like, I'm coming to your house to hang out. Am I going to lock the door and run away? If I have a guest who comes to my house to stay the night before the time of Maghrib, they are considered my dependent on the night of Eid. And then therefore I would pay for my family and whoever is in my house that is a dependent on me. So tomorrow night if I don't see any of you here, I understand you went to your brother's house, or your sister's house, or your uncle's house, that it's their problem to pay your fitrah and your kids' fitrah and you don't want to pay. I'll understand. I won't call you out, but I'll understand. So this idea of an obligation, now what Sayyid Sistani has done is that at the nights of Ramadan, we have relatives who visit us for dinner. Well, what if that relative comes after Maghrib and comes for dinner? Sayyid Sistani says that it's ihtiyat, as a precaution, you should pay for them as well too. That even though it's their obligation to pay on their own, you should pay for them as well too. That you make sure that someone who's in your house, you took care of them, that you have the obligation to fulfill this. But it doesn't mean that anyone who comes to your door on the night of Eid, you have to lock your door and don't let anyone near your house, because if they come near your house, you'll have to pay. No, if they're coming to your house to eat, if they're coming to your house to stay, then pay. If they're coming to drop off a gift, take the gift. It's okay. You don't have to pay for it. It's all right. So these obligations of who to pay and how to pay are how we determine what our obligation of Zakat-al-Fitra is. So in essence, it should be the father or the head of the household takes the responsibility that whoever lives in his house, whoever lives under his roof, whoever is under his care. Now it may happen, I have a house and a guest house. It can happen, right? Inshallah, it happens for all of us, right? So the question comes, if I have a relative staying in the guest house, he's not under my roof physically, do I have to pay for him? Yes, you have to pay for him because that's in your property, that's under your responsibility, unless if there's an understanding already that that's considered a separate property or a separate environment. Who do we give fitrah to? So, fitrah has to be given to a mu'min who is poor and does not have what's called mu'unat al-sana, or is in a state of poverty, meaning that they don't have the ability to pay for their resources. Ma'unat al-sana means that they have enough income to cover their yearly expenses, or they have a job that gives them enough income to cover their yearly expenses, and it needs to be given to a mu'min. This is where we start getting into the social aspect of the rule of Zakat-al-Fitra. Zakat-al-Fitra does not need to be paid to a Marja. As a matter of fact, the recommendation is that you as an individual, or me as an individual living in this community, knows my community well enough to know who in my community is in need, and I directly go and I disperse my Zakat-al-Fitra to them from my own hands. That we know our environment, our community, our people well enough that we know the mu'mineen who are in this kind of situation, and we take care of it with discretion. We take care of it with due respect, that we offer them this fitrah and we provide it to them. Now, in the absence of us knowing directly, it is recommended and it is the preferred and it is the responsibility that Zakat-al-Fitra is paid in your community. That if there are needy people in our community here, I'm not sending my fitrah to Pakistan or Iraq or Sudan or wherever else in the world that I could send it to. I kept away from Dar on purpose. But my obligation comes to my home first, my society first. Now it happens, alhamdulillah, that maybe we don't have people who are in this kind of situation. Or maybe there are more mu'mineen who live in this environment than there are mu'mineen who are in need of this money. Then I can go out and I can look for mu'mineen in other places that are in need of this money. How do I determine where I should send it to? Well, first and foremost, I look to my relatives. That do I have relatives? Do I have family? Do I have people who are connected to me that I, because of my relationship to them, intimately know that they are in need? And if they had to go to somebody else, it would be them exposing their needs to a third person. But I can personally fulfill that obligation, then that's where I should give it. And I should give my Zakat-al-Fitra to those family members. This is where this becomes important. Remember something, it's not just Zakat-al-Fitra, but even sadaqah and charity that we want to give. It's our obligation to pay attention to people in need, not wait and say that, oh, nobody asked me, so I guess nobody needs. No, it's our job to pay attention. It's our job to pay attention to our relatives, to our communities, to our neighbors. And if we see someone in need, we meet their needs. And the beauty of Islam is that the dignity of the believer is very important. I can hand him my Zakat al-Fitra and I don't have to say, hey, you know, this is Zakat al-Fitra because you're really poor. Or this is sadaqah and charity because I think you're poor. I don't have to say anything. I can simply say, this is a gift for you. Even if it's Sahm Sadat, I don't have to say, hey, dear Balak, be careful, this is Sahm Sadat. Dehan se. No. Islam says the dignity of that person is more responsible. Allah says, I want to know you fulfilled your obligation. Society doesn't have to know that you fulfilled your obligation. Keep the dignity of that person. Don't tell them the details of what you're giving them, but fulfill the obligation by providing them these resources and making sure that it's taken care of. Now, if, for example, in our community, we find that we can't find these people, our center has resources, we give it to our center to make sure that people in our community are provided for. Let's say our center turns around and says that we've satisfied everybody's needs that we have in this community. Then that center can take that and present it to an obligation to another individual or another center or another institution that can make sure that it reaches the necessary people if they can't find it. Or if I live in an area or a place where there is no center, there is no community. Maybe I'm away at college in Buffalo, although Buffalo has a center. Let's say Binghamton. I'm in Binghamton. Laylatul Eid comes. It's time to pay fitra. I have to take it out. I don't know a single person in Binghamton. There are no mu'mineen and no centers. There's no way for me to find where to do this. I can give it to an international or national or local organization in another area to make sure that it reaches another person if I can't fulfill the obligation on my own. All right. That's the general rundown, and that's it. This becomes obligation on us starting tomorrow night. Tomorrow and during the day, take advantage of it. Do anything unique and special that if Allah gave you one more day of mercy, we did something with it. If there's any questions, this is the time to post them now. If there's anyone who has any questions that they'd like to ask in person, we can do that as well too. I'm looking to see if anything pops up. Sorry, the internet's slow. I don't think I see anything. Yes. No problem. It's okay.
Like we talked about sharing of the horizon
Mm-hmm.
for moon sighting. But what if there is a possibility that we are in the same horizon, but visibility because of the weather, the clouds and rain and whatever, snowstorm or something.
So that's the benefit of using the scientific method, that if we use a scientific method, and though it's not visible here, but I know I share a horizon with somebody else, I can look at what they see and I can count it for myself in that situation if they're under the same curve as I am in that situation. So it is possible. That's one of the benefits of the scientific method. Okay. I do have some more questions, and then we'll start here. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So for example, the question was, if I'm a muqallid of Sayyid Khou'i, though I live in New York, and according to Sayyid Sistani, there's no possibility to see the moon, but according to Ayatollah Khou'i, there is the night shared, and someone in California or Vancouver sees it, can I celebrate Eid tomorrow? 100%, absolutely. Don't eat in front of us, but you can. Science aside, what are thoughts around a unified Eid for all Muslims to celebrate on the same date? Has there ever been consideration around this thought? Ahl Sunnah have essentially submitted to this. That's why they all follow Saudi Arabia, that whatever Saudi Arabia does, we'll accept. Even the Sunni Muslims are starting to change their opinion on the subject and said that why are we looking to them when we can't see the moon in our own environment? We should look in our own place to understand if the moon is seen. Some are coming to this conclusion. Us, the Madhab Ja'fari, the celebration is one thing, the observation is another thing. Observation means that this day is Eid, we don't fast on this day, it is haram to fast on this day, and we recite Salat al-Eid on this day as a mustahabbat. Doing that in a unified aspect would require that some people don't follow their marja and other people follow their marja. The most important thing for unity in the period of ghaibat of our imam is that each of us enacts our wazifa amal, what our obligation and responsibility is to enact. Our responsibility in this time is that to follow the most learned marja and to perform the actions wajib for Islam as our marja instructs us. Now, us as a community can come to the decision that some of our mu'mineen, for example, will be celebrating Eid tomorrow, mathalan, if it happens. And some will be celebrating it on Saturday. That we collectively come to the decision that because our community is split, we'll have the Eid celebration on Saturday so that everybody can come together and spend time together. That's a communal decision to make. The religious obligation is not something we can ask people to compromise on because it's very dangerous. If I choose to celebrate Eid tomorrow because Sayyid Khouy said, and I'm not, Ali Raza, I'm not criticizing you or anything, but let's say Sayyid Khouy said Eid is tomorrow, khalas, I'm going to listen to Sayyid Khouy. I'm a muqallid of Sayyid Sistani. That means that tomorrow is day for me wajib to fast, and I'm refusing to fast. I committed a sin. Let's say, for example, Sayyid Khouy says tomorrow is Eid, but my whole community is fasting tomorrow, so I say, you know what, I'll fast with my community, and I'll do Eid on Saturday. Baba, it's haram to fast on the day of Eid. It's haram. It's a sin. You can't fast on the day of Eid. Allah forbade it. So this is why the individual responsibility, and make sure that we're all intelligent enough and we're all paying attention to our responsibility and fulfilling our obligation as what Allah demanded us, is the best aspect of unity that we can come to. And then when it comes to the celebration, yeah, we can pick the collective day. We can ask our management to make sure that everybody can participate in that day of celebration so that no one is left out. Does it mean that maybe our celebration won't be on the day of Eid that I celebrate? That's where unity comes in. Am I willing to make the sacrifice, or am I expecting Islam to make the sacrifice? Most of the time we want Islam to make the sacrifice. No, my brother is doing Eid tomorrow, why do I have to do it on Saturday? No, Baba, your brother is doing Eid tomorrow, you're doing it on Saturday. Celebrate together on Saturday then, or celebrate on Sunday. Why can't I make the sacrifice? Why does Islam have to make the sacrifice? That no, let's not do this. All right. How did Saudi report a moon sighting when it's impossible to see? Because that's Saudi Arabia and they've been doing this for years now. This isn't a new question. This has been going on for a long time. One of the explanations that they have is that they say that, oh, it's scientifically possible, so it's good enough. But if you remember the map that I showed you guys, it is literally, physically impossible for anyone to see the moon in Saudi Arabia. Come on, here we go. Now, this, one more behind this. This. Look, this is Saudi Arabia. It's not possible. But they did it. And they do it every year. And they do whatever they want to, and there's nothing we can do about it. Fazaba, you had something?
If you know somebody who is not self-sufficient in your area, you said that you should give them the gospel to them. But how much for them to sustain for 1 day, for 1 month, for 1 week, for 1 year?
So, okay. So, you know someone in your area who is eligible to receive Zakat-al-Fitra, how much should you give to them? Now, in the case of an individual, my obligation is to give 6.6 pounds of food, which is equivalent to about $10 to $12 or $15 if I'm looking at really nice food. I can give mine to them. If enough people give it that they have ma'unat as-sana, that they have enough to provide for the year and that they're sufficient for the year, then fine, then we don't have to give them anymore because they're no longer considered faqir under the definition. But the chances of someone giving them enough, or for example, me having enough people in my house that I can give enough for the whole family or that whole family to have for a year's purpose, it's going to be very limited. So the chances... So, and then the center's obligation generally, so, and that's it. The way, and I know that our community has a fund, and I'm not talking about our community's fund, I'm talking about in general. In general, when a community takes the resource, whether it's Muslim, Christian, anybody, they look at a month's worth of expenses to provide that family with that month's worth of expenses that they get through this month. And then next month if they need more, and sometimes it's a week. Some communities can only give 1 week at a time. And they give 1 week, and then if that person needs more, they come back the next week, and if we have enough for the next week, we give them next week. So institutions themselves don't just turn over and say, this is all the money we collected at Merry Eid, and just hand them this whole sum of money. No, there's a structure to providing, and that structure is provide 1 month at a time to make sure that they have sufficiency for now, and they have the opportunity and the possibility to stand up on their own feet, and that if Allah changes their condition, they don't have to live on other people's money. They have the opportunity to have their own dignity and their own process. So generally speaking, the process as it exists, it's a well thought out process, is that it looks at the needs immediate, Make sure that the immediate needs are satisfied, that this person will not go hungry for this period of time, and that if Allah gives them, going forward, they'll be able to take care of themselves. So we do generally have processes in place. And again, I have not reviewed the processes in our center, but I can't imagine they're much different than what I've described. All right? At the time of our Prophet and Imams, was a divided Eid relevant? Well, did they even know it was a divided Eid? Like if you were living in Medina, how would you know what was happening in Mashhad? By the time the writer got there from there, and we have narrations say on this and this day and this location Eid was celebrated, and this and this day, this and this location Eid was celebrated. And they would be different. This problem of that, why is the world doing Eid separately, is because the world has become a smaller place and we can get information around the globe quickly. When there wasn't this information, did people even care? Many places these things aren't even recorded because nobody cared. It was about Eid in my place, I had fun. Why do I care what people in India are doing if I live in Saudi Arabia? Well, I wasn't Saudi Arabia, it was Hijaz. Let's call it Hijaz. Nobody cared. It was relevant to my location, and that's what history tells us. That in one location, they looked at the sky together, they came to the conclusion on what's going on, and this was the celebration of Eid. It wasn't much further than that. All right? So is Eid tomorrow? No. All right? Yes. Okay, that's a great question, actually. Can we give fitrah sooner than the night of Eid? What you do is I take fitrah out, I give it to someone who I've given the responsibility, for example, the center, for example, an organization, to disperse the fitrah, and I make the intention that when the night of Eid comes, this money I'm giving will be fitrah. And then when the night of Eid comes, you say, that money that I gave so-and-so to hold on to for me, now that money is considered fitrah. So this is, thank you, that was something that's worthwhile. You can pay it from the first of Ramadan, but you pay it with the intention that when Eid night comes, inshallah, this will be my fitrah that I pay. And then when the night of Eid comes, you say, now that money that I gave so-and-so to hold on to, now it's considered fitrah. And that from that moment it changes. So for the same way, I gave someone something to hold on to and then I said, hey, now you can keep it. Or hey, now it's with this intention. I can change the intention, that's what I do. I pay it in advance with the intention that this will be fitrah. And then when the night of Eid comes, I change my intention that that money that I put there or I gave to that person, now that is considered to be fitrah. All right? If Washington had seen the moon, why can't we follow it even though it's on a different horizon, but we know the moon is born, we just can't see it. So this is where the conversation that I mentioned, that we're definitely out because not only did nobody see it in the gray area, but nobody along the eastern coast that is close to us saw it either. Had there been the chance that, for example, New Jersey saw it, that's when we have a difficult conversation to see that though they're on a different horizon and they're only an hour away, can it apply to us or not? Alhamdulillah, we don't have to have that conversation. We don't have to have that issue. And I didn't have a proper resolution prepared for that, should that be the case. So we would have looked to the ulama of, and there is a moon sighting council. There is a group of scholars who sit and pay attention to this on a monthly basis. We would have gone to them and said that while it's not on our horizon, it's an hour away, how do we deal with this? And a group of scholars would have helped us to figure out what is our Shari responsibility. The fact is that it didn't happen. And we know it didn't happen because there's no reportings from here to Ohio so far. And going west, no one has seen it yet. So it won't apply to us in this situation. All right? If a tree falls in a forest, does it make a sound? It could be there but not visible, but if it's there and not visible, it's still there. That's very true, it's there, but the restriction for counting it as being there is seeing it, because the Quran specified you have to see it. So, it's there. The moon is always there. The moon doesn't go away. It's not like the moon does a magic trick and it doesn't come until, oh, surprise, I'm here. No, the moon is there. We know it's there, but we can't see it. We know when the new moon begins, but we can't see it. Until we can see it, we cannot count it. If Eid is in New Jersey, can we go there and have Eid? Now, in this, okay, hang on, okay, listen. There's 4 people who want to know the answer to this question, so I'll tell you. Right now, this is interesting. Right now, knowing that tomorrow is going to be the 30th of the month of Ramadan. Let's say that tomorrow, in an hour, we get news that New Jersey is celebrating Eid tomorrow because of this blue, this horizon. You can go. And because you're a traveler, you won't even fast. You can eat the nihari, the chana, the puri, the halwa, everything. But guess what? You still have to perform the qadha of the 30th day because it was obligatory here to perform that fast. And you left here after knowing there was a fast tomorrow, and you went to a place where there's no fast. That's okay. Hey, listen, man, even if tomorrow they do Eid, they don't do Eid and they do it the 30th day, if you're a musafir, it's haram for you to fast. You can go. Go do safar, go travel. You can't fast then, but you have to make up the qadha. So at this point in time, what we know now, the tree falls, we know this tree has fallen. Tomorrow is the 30th. Now if I travel, I don't have to fast tomorrow because I'm a traveler, but I have a qadha fast that I have to make up. That would be my obligation. Is it correct to say that if the moon was seen anywhere in the gray area, New York would also follow it? Or would we doubt it because you need optical aid? You need optical aid to find it. We would look at the report. When someone says, I saw the moon, we don't just say hooray and put something in our mouth. No, we go and we ask questions, which is why two just witnesses, two mu'mineen are required to sight the moon, and they give a description and we pay attention to how was it seen. For example, the muqallideen of Sayyid Khamenei, Hafidhahullah, can look at the moon with an optical aid and say if they can see it with an optical aid and it's seen. For example, with a telescope I can see the moon, but with my eye I can't. According to that, it's possible that it can be Eid. But when they issue the sighting and they say that we saw the moon, we'll ask how. And they'll say, well, we saw it with our telescope. Okay, Mubarak. It doesn't count for me, but for those who can see on the basis of an optical aid, for them, alhamdulillah, it's Eid. But for us, no, we have to pay attention. But yes, if it was seen in the gray area, if Boston came back, Montreal came back, said we saw the moon, and they gave us a verified sighting, and they showed us the information, and we were satisfied, we would say Eid Mubarak. But the fact that it's passed, that's the problem.
A follow-on to this question. With this multiplicity of horizons concept, clearly our ijtihad is following scientific advancement.
It's using scientific advancement, yeah.
Spotting it with a telescope or optical aid is simply keeping up with the advancement of technology.
So the comment is, okay, so the comment is, or the question is, sorry, to phrase it appropriately so that everybody can hear, is that since using an optical aid to see the moon is just using scientific tools the way we're using scientific tools in these maps, why can't we do it? Because the Quran specifically said when you see the moon. So the question now comes that seeing of the moon, does it count if it's done with an optical aid, or does it have to be done in the most truest sense of that term, which is with our eyes? Majority of ulama say that it has to be done with the eye because that's what humanity could use for the past 1,000, 1,400 years, and that's the same rule that applies to the entire world whether we have a telescope or not. Otherwise, the haves versus the have-nots would always do better than those that don't have. So majority of our ulama say that the statement of the Quran to see it when it's visible is with the naked eye, and that's what our obligation is. Majority. So it's not a question of that scientific tool being available to a community or a person. Doesn't standardize that every human being in every time has this tool, so therefore we don't follow it that way. All right? We'll look at two more of these and we'll
So based on Akash's planets following, do they allow using the scientific optical tools and all that?
To find it, yes, but you have to be able to see it with your eye. So you can find it. I can use my phone, I can use a telescope to find it, but if I can't see it without that, it doesn't count. So I need to be able to see it with just my eye. Okay, here's one on Fitra, and then, so is there a difference in Fitra pay or recipients if Zakaat-al-Fitra is being paid by a Sayyid versus non-Sayyid? So the Fitra of a Sayyid is paid out to Sadat. A Sayyid, someone who is from the lineage of the Holy Prophet, can accept Fitra from another Sayyid, but they cannot accept Fitra from a non-Sayyid because that would be seen as charity, and this is why Sahm Sadat exists, and that's a different conversation at that point in time. So this is why there is a differentiation. A Sayyid can give their Fitra to a non-Sayyid or to a Sayyid, but a non-Sayyid can't give their Fitra to a Sayyid. Hopefully that's clear. Why is it forbidden to fast on Eid? Because Allah commanded it to be a day of rest. Allah commanded that it's haram for you to fast on the day of Eid, that Allah, after giving you this wajib action, has given you a time and a place to rest. We've gone very long tonight, inshallah, and we can, some of these other questions we can pick another time. There's actually quite a few of them, which is really interesting, and inshallah we'll work on it. But for now, I think we've had a good discussion. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. ندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله 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 يا محمود بحق محمد يا أعلى بحق علي يا فاطر السماوات بحق فاطمة يا محسن بحق الحسن يا قديم الإحسان بحق الحسين. Oh Allah, accept a small ibadat from us. Ya Allah, give the thawab of this majlis to our marhumin, the marhumin of tonight's sponsors, and all those who are in need of dua. Ya Allah, we have gathered here by the right of Thursday night, by the right of the month of Ramadan. We have gathered with hajat. Ya Allah, by the right of this night, by the right of this month, fulfill our hajat. Oh Allah, forgive our sins, cover our flaws. Ya Allah, keep our children on the upright path of Islam. Ya Allah, those amongst our families and our communities that are suffering through sickness and disease, Ya Allah, give shafa'at to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Oh Allah, hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Make us and our families from the upright supporters of Sahib al-Zaman, and entitle us to the Shafa of Abdullah in dunya and akhirah. 1 Surah Fatiha, 3 times Surah Ikhlas, for the fact that it is Thursday night, for our marhumin, the marhumin of tonight's sponsor, and all those who are in need of dua, with your loudest of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.